All right, everybody, welcome back to Top Comics Pressing. I wanted to take just a minute to talk about purple labels and the cover cleaned notation. So for those of you that have been following the community for roughly the last 2 years, the Captain Mike team, including myself, put out this book, the Comic Book Stain Removal and Whitening Handbook. The handbook introduced two kind of basic techniques for improving the quality of a comic book, mostly the HOP method, the heat overlay press, and the bled method, which is for blue LEDs, and then that complements with either using a hydrogen peroxide mist or an overlay. And the basic idea of these two methods is to extract tannings or stains from a comic book, as well as to lighten and brighten the overall appearance, and simultaneously treat things like foxing. That being said, technically, some people view these as restorative techniques, and depending on what they look at, they might label them as a cover clean notation. You can get this both at CGC or at CVCS. This comes up, a number of people have messaged me about either getting this notation on books that they've worked on, or they submitted a book through a third-party presser and the third-party presser had a book cleaned. To the best of my knowledge, as full honesty, I have not been tagged with a cover cleaned notation at CGC Comics since December 2022 at the recording of this video. Okay, that being said, during the fall and early winter of 2022, I was responsible for a couple of purple labels, as well as a couple of comic books which were designated as being conserved with a cover cleaned, which is kind of a lighter version. I don't really understand what CGC's difference is between a conserved cover cleaning and a restorative color cover cleaning. You can look up in their grading handbook what they consider restoration versus conservation and try to make sense of that. I think it's basically, you can get a conserved label if they're pretty sure you did a cover cleaning, but you didn't overdo it or leave any really obvious damages to it, okay? That being said, I think the damages that CGC or the cues or hints that CGC or CBS are using really to look for tag books are a combination of things. So I do not believe that it is a single observation, nor do I think that it is a direct chemical analysis of the paper that leads them to conclude that there's residual hydrogen peroxide on it. Okay, and the reason I say that is hydrogen peroxide as a molecule is very difficult for somebody to quantify on something like paper without destroying the paper sample. And so you need a non-destructive analytical technique. And the most common of those non-destructive analytical techniques are going to interfere with the makeup of what paper is naturally, mostly cellulose and lignin, which are the two kind of primary chemical components of the paper, as well as whatever ink or gloss is used on top of them. So, the rosins or the kaolins or the things that go in to actually seal and coat the paper. Okay, so I think a direct chemical analysis is out. I think CGC has rightfully been using a number of indirect methods to determine if a comic book has been cleaned. I think the most obvious of those is if the interior matches the exterior. And so if you have a comic book like this, and by the way, these two comic books were featured in a different video I did where I started with both of them side by side. And this one was a darker, dirtier, more disgusting look than this one. And at the end of them, they're flipped. This one's ghost white. And then this one has a nice creamy look to it, and it looks natural for a book of its era. And in that video, which I strongly encourage you to go back and look at, so I'll drop a link to that below, I point out that this one, the Thor comic, has been undoubtedly, absolutely cover cleaned, restored. And it looks fantastic, and I love looking at it because that Kirby art pops. That being said, it is or would justly get a purple label. This one, I believe, would squeeze on by with the universal CGC label. I was going to hold off on sending this one until I met Jim Steranko, but I actually did meet Jim Steranko at HeroCon last year, and I opted instead to have him sign my Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. #4, and so we got a really nice conversation. with Jim Steranko, with all kinds of wonderful commentary and knowledge just dropped on us. It was like a knowledge fire hose. It was pretty awesome. Anyway, so if you get a chance to meet Jim Steranko, I strongly encourage you to do that. I was really happy to capture his autograph on this one. Comparing these two to this one is going to be your first clue for what CGC is looking at. In the line, when the person in front of Jim is taking our money and swiping our credit card to compensate for the signature, so that Jim can scribble and talk with people. The guy, even from arm's length, he's like, "Wow, that one is bright." Usually, when I see those, they look disgusting and dingy, and yours is sharp. Okay, that's red flag number one, right? By the way, this one is also been double hopped and bled misted, and it is bone white, and it would absolutely truly be a purple label, cover cleaned annotation. I'm fine with it. This one's for my PC. I love looking at it on my wall. It looks way better from arm's length. The whole thing is black and white, and black and white pops a lot better when it's black and white and not dingy, yellowish, brownish cream and white. And so to me, that was awesome, and I chose this one to have Jim sign because it's awesome. Anyway, so your flag number one is when the person who is not a comic book grader from arm's length across the table says, "Wow, that thing is really white. I'm used to seeing them dingy." You have to make sure that your comic book has some patina and some believability for the era. And, I think that that's really obvious. I've had a couple people send me their purple label books and see if I could figure out what was going on. And a number of them were Silver Age books that looked like they were 2023 facsimile editions. Okay, and I'm not joking about that. They were bone white for books that were supposed to be roughly 60 years old. Okay, so not only did those books probably never start that white, because paper bleaching in 2023 is so much better than it was in the 60s, those things started out slightly cream, I'm sure, or at least a really, really subtle off-white, maybe an eggshell. We can go into exactly what kind of paint shade it should be, but the point is they did not look like their 2023 facsimiles. So your first flag is that one. And at least to be honest, if I sent these to CGC, I think that they would be full in their rights to label them cover cleaned, artificially lightened right off the bat. And I'm okay with that. I think it's important for them as a grading entity to maintain a standard. And when you can look at something from arm's length and say somebody doctored this thing, then it's restored. And I'm fine with that. I don't think that that's fair. I'll have a different video, by the way, talking philosophically about restoration versus conservation versus just normal cleaning. It's a pretty gray spectrum. But I think at the baseline, if you can look at it from arm's length across the table after seeing hundreds of these that Jim signs constantly and be like, "Wow, that thing pops," it's probably restored. Okay. Other things that I'm pretty sure CGC is looking for is indirect evidence of comic book cleaning that you want to be careful of. And I would encourage you, if you get slapped with that purple label, feel free to crack it out of the slab and do yourself some honest assessment and look at your book. Okay, going all the way back into this thing, things that are going to be a dead giveaway. And this has a section on cover cleaning. Okay, what you want to look for is, does your book have cover shrinkage? That is, if you look, and this one does not, because I did a really good job on it. This one has a little bit. Yeah, I think this one's got a little bit of cover shrinkage. So if I look across the bottom, I can see inner pages, and there's a very, very thin sliver of what looks like cover missing. So that thing is either trimmed or it has a slightly shrunken cover, and you can kind of see it across the top as well. This thing probably lost only, I'm gonna say 2 or 3 millimeters on the top, and 1 or 2 millimeters on the bottom. So we're talking less than 5 millimeters. But if I look at that cover as a function of those inner wraps, and the cover is smaller on the top and bottom, it's probably cover cleaned. Okay, and the reason for that is evidence of a lot of moisture exposure to relax all those paper fibers and let them scrunch up. Now, how do you prevent that? Well, this was one of my earlier double hops. You're using too much moisture, so you want to cut back on the moisture to keep the cover from shrinking. But nevertheless, that cover shrinking is going to be one. Another one that you'll see is cockling. That is, if you look at the book and you see a lot of crinkled look in any particular spot, doesn't have to be much. Okay, but one of the other pressers who I know and trust had a book that came to them with cockling, and they did some light bled work on it, and it came back with a cover clean purple label. And he was asking me what I thought about it, and the before pictures had cockling in it, and I said, dude, that I would not have done any work on that book, because that cockling is going to send off alarm bells even if you didn't do anything. It'll have a higher probability because it's clearly had moisture damage, and it has that little like crinkled look. And true cockling, that really true compressed paper fibers, is darn near impossible to press out. So you can do what you can with the tacking iron, and you can iron it this way, and you can iron it this way, and you can iron it in a circle, and then you can press it and press it and press it. It's very hard to get out true cockling once it's crunched the paper fibers in. Okay. If you're doing hops, the easiest way to prevent cockling is to add more pressure to your comic book. The trade-off there is if you have too much pressure, eventually you'll have those overlays stick to your comic book, and that'll bring us to the third point, which is color lift. So if you have chunks of color missing off your comic book, that is a sign that somebody has done something to it. As well as if you have really obvious color fade in a particular area that's not just natural sunlight. Okay, so CGC has looked at comic books that have natural sun fade. Usually the background whites are quite extensively yellowed because sunlight has a lot of UV light in it. The UV light will interact differently with the lignin and the paper fiber. That tends to lead to yellowing and browning. The blue light doesn't have UV in it, so every time I see somebody on YouTube or Instagram call a blue light UV light, I freak out because it's not. By the way, I have a separate video on that, so you can check that one as well. But the blue light is a completely different frequency, and it's going to bleach or ruin colors in a different spectrum. It's going to have a different gradient. That being said, the normal blue LED misting and the normal blue LED overlays, I have seen very minimal color fade, and the people that have these templates to try to prevent it by covering something with like these laser cut masks is just stupidity in my opinion. There's no way you're only exposing that part to water. What you're going to do is have water droplets run into that template and bleed underneath it and create just a mess. And two, you're not fooling anybody. Like, the light will refract and bounce around underneath that template in different ways. So it's not helping. It's just causing a problem. And the true answer is just don't overdo it and don't use crazy amounts of peroxide. All right. So those are, I think, the big things that CGC is flagging with the cover cleaned annotation. And you have to be very careful. And again, if you've been tagged with these, what I would encourage you to do, and these are not my cover clean notations, by the way. But if you have been tagged, I encourage you to crack that book out of the slab. Give it 3 months, okay? Because some of the early ones I did that were tagged, by the time they made it back into my hands, it had been a while. I had gotten better with the techniques, and I could look at these and be like, oh yeah, these have been worked on, and by the way, it was me and it was my fault, but it was quite obvious. And then since then, I've really tried to take to heart, and I think a lot of the books we'll get through no problem. At least I've had a very good streak in 2023, and to me that's important. So again, go back through the videos. I really strongly encourage you to rewatch this one here, because this was a side-by-side again of the dingier copy outracing it and becoming by a mile the brighter, whiter, sharper looking copy. And I think that this side-by-side comparison captured a lot of what I wanted to say about it. All right, I'm going to have a separate video just talking philosophically about restoration, conservation, or universally accepted cleaning and pressing techniques. And I'll talk about the gradients of some of those techniques and where you officially cross a line, but you don't, maybe it doesn't match up with what people would colloquially think. All right, so anyway, stay tuned for that. Hopefully you've gotten something out of this video. I still truly believe that these techniques are good. They really do they've been a game changer to the comic book community. The number of insane bumpskis I've gotten by using these techniques are really, truly impressive. And, I think a special shout out is in order to James at Key Issue Collectibles. So go find him both for his comic clean. He's got a bunch of other tricks in the work, but he's also just a very clever individual and a very good comic book presser. So check out James, and of course, give a big thumbs up to anybody who's on the Captain Mike Facebook group. Please just post thanking Chris Trump, because Chris Trump's really the pioneer of identifying the blue LED bulbs and kind of bringing that into comic book pressing, at least in my opinion. So go ahead and leave a big thank you for Chris Trump. These are solid, and keep on collecting. Drop your comments. I'd love to respond to them. Tag me on Instagram, whatever. Tag me on the Captain Mike Facebook channel, whatever. I'm here to help you all figure out your techniques and, make progress as you learn as a presser. So click that subscribe button, give the thumbs up, and drop a comment there.